When I was 5 years old, my life was sold for $30,000. I didn't know it then, but that night changed everything. A black van waited outside my family's old apartment. My mother kissed my forehead and told me to be brave. She promised she would come back for me soon. That was the last time I ever saw her smile. 2 men lifted me into the van like luggage. I cried until my throat burned. No one answered my screams. The city lights disappeared behind us. I arrived at a large house on the edge of the city. Its gates were tall and cold. A woman in black stood waiting. Her eyes were sharp and empty. "Is this the replacement?" she asked. One of the men nodded and took the money. That was the moment I became property. They gave me a new name. They called me Number 7. My old name was erased. My room was a small white cell. There was no window. Only a camera on the ceiling. Every day, nurses took my blood. They measured my heartbeat. They weighed my body like meat. I wasn't allowed to cry. Crying meant punishment. I learned to stay silent. I learned to obey. At night, I whispered my real name to myself, so I wouldn't forget who I was. One day, I saw another child in the hallway. He looked just like me. He had the same scar on his neck. He whispered, "I am Number 6. That was when I realized the truth. We were not children. We were spare parts. The house was not a home. It was a warehouse. A warehouse for living bodies. That night, Number 6 disappeared. His bed was empty. His name was never spoken again. I stopped sleeping after that. I waited for my turn. I counted every breath. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. Until one night, alarms screamed. Red lights filled the halls. Footsteps thundered past my door. The camera went dark. My door unlocked. A man in a black coat appeared. He whispered, "Run if you want to live." I didn't ask questions. I ran barefoot through the halls. Doors slammed behind me. Cold air hit my face. I was outside. Rain soaked my clothes. Sirens wailed in the distance. I kept running. I didn't look back. Because I knew what would happen if I did. That was the night I escaped. But my nightmare had only begun. They were still looking for me. And they would never stop. Not until they took back what they owned. Or until I was dead. I didn't know where to go. I only knew I couldn't stop. Because I was no longer Number 7. I was taking my life back. Even if it meant burning their world down. This was only the beginning. My revenge had just started. And they didn't know my real name yet. But they would learn it soon, because I was coming back. Stronger than before. Smarter than before. And far more dangerous. They created a monster. Now they would face it. This was their mistake. And my awakening. The game had begun. And there would be no mercy. Not for them. Not anymore. I disappeared into the night. But my shadow stayed behind. Waiting. Watching. Planning. Until the day I would return. And take everything they stole from me. 10 years later, I returned to the city that erased me. No one recognized the boy they had sold. I walked in as a stranger with a borrowed name. The Lamb family was hosting a public charity gala. They were donating money to children's hospitals. I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. Their empire was built on stolen bodies. Yet the world saw them as saints. I wore a black suit and a calm smile. Inside, my blood was burning. I entered the land villa without any hesitation. A woman stood at the door, staring at my face. Her hands started to tremble. She whispered, "It can't be." I smiled politely and bowed my head. "My name is Daniel Cross. I'm here to discuss a business partnership." She stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like expensive perfume and lies. Family portraits lined the walls. They showed perfect smiles and perfect children. None of them was me. I was erased from every frame. A tall man walked toward me. He was my biological father. But he didn't know that yet. He shook my hand warmly. "Welcome to the Lamb family," he said. I almost felt sick hearing that name. But I kept smiling. I needed to get close to them. Close enough to destroy them. That night, I met their precious son. He had my eyes. And my scar. The replacement. The boy who took my life. He stared at me with innocent curiosity. "Are you my brother?" he asked. I forced a gentle smile. "Something like that," I replied. Inside, my heart was screaming. They had replaced me. As if I had never existed. I went to my hotel that night. I stared at myself in the mirror. The scar on my neck burned. "I will take it all back," I whispered. "Every single thing." The game had officially begun. I planted my first seed of revenge. A silent wiretap inside the Lamb office. Their secrets started flowing to me. Illegal donations. Hidden clinics. Private organ transactions. Everything they tried to bury. I was building a case against them. Brick by brick. Blood by blood. They thought I was just another guest. But I was their executioner. Waiting for the perfect moment. And it was getting closer. Much closer. They laughed at the dinner table. They toasted to their future. They had no idea what was coming. I watched them like prey. Patient. Silent. Ready. Because when I strike, they will lose everything. Their name. Their power. Their precious empire. And they will finally know my pain. This time, I won't disappear. I will make them remember me. My real name. My real face. My real blood. Their nightmare has returned. And it wears a human face. Men. They can't escape me. Not anymore. The clock is ticking. And so is their fate. I will tear down their heaven. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. Until only truth remains. And only blood debts are paid. Their smiles are numbered. Their fall is scheduled. And I will be the one to end it. Very soon. Extremely soon. The next morning, the villa felt unusually quiet. Servants avoided my eyes as I walked past. They knew something was changing. Power always announces itself in silence. I entered the family office without knocking. My mother was standing by the window. Her smile was warm and practiced. "You look tired, my son," she said softly. I nodded and sat across from her. "I had a strange dream," I replied. In it, a mother sold her own child. Her fingers tightened around her teacup. "Dreams mean nothing," she said calmly. I leaned forward. What if the child survived? Her eyes flickered for a brief second. "That would be unfortunate," she answered. I smiled gently. "Unfortunate for whom?" I asked. She didn't reply. The room filled with a heavy silence. I stood up slowly. "One more thing," I said. "Do you believe blood can be replaced?" She finally looked at me directly. "Everything can be replaced," she replied. "Except the truth." I walked out without another word. Her perfume followed me down the hall. It smelled like roses and poison. That afternoon, Scarlett sent me new files. Audio recordings. Hidden contracts. And bank transfers. All signed by my mother. She had paid to erase me. Legally. Systematically. And permanently. Except I survived. I sent copies to a private prosecutor. I also forwarded them to rival shareholders. The board would soon be divided. Just as I planned. That night, the family gathered for dinner. My mother poured me wine. Her hand shook slightly. "To family," she toasted. "To truth," I replied. She didn't drink. The walls seemed to listen. Every secret was waiting to be exposed. I checked my phone under the table. The prosecutor had replied. Case accepted. I looked up, slowly, and met my mother's eyes. The countdown had begun. She just didn't know it yet. The trap was already set. All she had to do was breathe, and she would trigger it. My revenge was no longer a thought. It was a system. Built to collapse her world. Quietly. Perfectly. And permanently. The mother who sold her son was about to lose everything. Her name. Her throne. Her precious lies. And her perfect family portrait. I would erase her smile. Just like she erased me. Only slower. Only cleaner. Only permanent. This was not anger anymore. It was justice. Cold. Precise. Unstoppable. Her fall was already written. She just hadn't read it yet. I took one last look at the dining room and smiled. Because the storm was finally here. and she was standing in the center of it. The first wall had cracked. The rest would follow. I walked away calmly, while her empire began to shake. No screams yet. No headlines yet. But the fall had begun. And I was the one who started it. This time, she could not escape. Not from her own blood. 3 days later, the board meeting was announced. Every major shareholder was invited. The media waited outside the building. My mother arrived wearing a calm smile. She believed she was still untouchable. I took my seat at the head of the table. Scarlett sat quietly beside me. Her eyes never left my mother. The meeting began with routine reports. Profits were down. Public trust was weakening. My mother listened patiently. She smiled at every complaint. Then it was my turn to speak. I have new information, I said calmly. The room immediately fell silent. Scarlett connected her tablet to the projector. Contracts filled the screen. Bank transfers appeared line by line. Audio recordings began to play. My mother's voice echoed in the room, ordering my removal, paying for my disappearance, erasing my legal identity. Gasps filled the room. Some shareholders stood up. Others stared in disbelief. My mother slowly rose from her chair. "This is fake," she said sharply. But her hands were shaking. I pressed another button. Security camera footage appeared, showing her signing the contracts in a private legal office. The date was clearly visible. So, was her signature? She sat back down slowly. Her face had turned pale. The chairman stood up. "We will suspend your authority," he announced, "until this investigation is complete." Security stepped into the room. My mother looked at me in disbelief. "You planned this," she whispered. I met her eyes calmly. "You taught me how," I replied. They escorted her out of the room. Cameras flashed through the glass walls. Her empire collapsed in real time. Scarlett whispered beside me. "It's over." "No," I replied quietly. "This is only the beginning." Because the final truth remained hidden. The secret behind my real birth. And the identity of my true father would soon come to light. And when it did, the family would shatter forever. I watched her disappear down the hall. Without shouting. Without begging. Without dignity. Only fear. Only regret. Only silence. The board resumed their meeting, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The heir had returned, and the throne was no longer empty. I straightened my suit and prepared for the next war. Because blood debts are never truly paid. They are inherited. And I was ready to collect every single drop. The story was far from over. It was only getting darker and more dangerous. The truth was sharpening its claws and coming for everyone, including me. Because the final secret was the most deadly one. And it was mine. The crown had chosen its owner. But the throne demanded a sacrifice, and I was ready to offer it. No more running. No more hiding. Only truth. Only blood. Only inheritance. The war had officially begun. And I was standing at the center, ready to finish what she started. This time, there would be no mercy. No forgiveness. Only the truth. The city fell silent after the scandal. My mother vanished from public view. Her name became a forbidden word. But my war was not finished. Because I still needed the truth. About the man who created me. My real father. Scarlett reopened sealed hospital records. Birth files hidden for 20 years. DNA samples never destroyed. They were still stored in a private lab. We sent in a request under court order. And waited. 3 days later, the results arrived. Scarlett's hands were shaking. She stared at the paper in silence, then slowly looked at me. "You won't believe this," she whispered. My heart began to pound. She handed me the report. My blood type. My genetic markers. And one matching identity. Only one man in the entire database. The founder of the empire. The man officially listed as my grandfather. But biologically, he was my father. The room spun. My hands went cold. That meant my mother had stolen her own father's child and raised me as disposable insurance to protect her real son. I wasn't born to be a spare. I was born to inherit everything. The empire was legally mine. By blood. By law. By destiny. Scarlet covered her mouth. This changes everything, she whispered. I slowly stood up. My reflection stared back at me. Not as a victim, but as the rightful heir. The true owner of the throne. My blood wasn't cursed. It was royal. And it was time. Time to end the blood debt. Time to reclaim my name. Time to take back my life. The heir had finally awakened. Nothing could stop him now. The empire was waiting. So was revenge. And justice. All bound by blood. The final chapter had begun. No more lies. No more fear. Only truth remained. Only the crown remained. And I was ready to wear it. Not as a shadow, but as the rightful king. The blood debt was finally paid. But the scars remained. A reminder of the past. A warning for the future. Never create a disposable heir. Because blood always remembers. And it always returns. To reclaim what was stolen. Even if generations must fall. The empire would change forever. And so would I. The throne finally had its true owner. And his name would be remembered. In whispers. In fear. In blood. The story was complete. But the legend had just begun. Because power never truly rests. It only waits for its next heir. And I was ready. Ready to rule. Ready to protect. Ready to destroy. Anyone who touched my crown? The blood debt was closed. But a new era had begun. And I was its first king. This time, the throne would not be stolen. It would be earned. By blood. by fate. 3 months after the coronation, the empire stabilized. But peace never visits those who rule. It only disguises itself as silence. I sat alone in the highest office of the Lamb Tower, watching the city kneel beneath glass and steel. Scarlet entered without knocking. Her eyes were sharp with warning. "There's a problem," she said. A name I hadn't heard in years. The Black Orchid Syndicate. They were the ones who originally brokered my sale. And they were moving again. Buying hospitals. Acquiring blood banks. Recruiting underground surgeons. They were rebuilding the organ market. This time under my empire. I smiled slowly. "They picked the wrong kingdom," I said. Because I was no longer prey. I was the hunter. Scarlet placed a dossier on my desk. Inside was a single name. Victor Crean. The new head of Black Orchid. A man who never left fingerprints. And never left witnesses. He thought I was just another soft heir. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I gave the order. Burn their channels. Freeze their accounts. And leave Crane for me. The chessboard was opening again. And this time, I was 10 moves ahead. Because the blood debt was not finished. It had just changed its target. The empire was about to learn. No one hunts inside my walls. Unless I allow it. A storm was coming. And this time, I would be the thunder. Season 2 had begun. And no one was safe. Not the syndicates. Not the corrupt doctors. Not the shadow bankers. They were all on my list. And the list was getting shorter. Because the hunt had begun. For every stolen life. For every hidden grave. The price would be paid. In full. No mercy. No escape. Only judgment. Only blood truth. And I was ready. To become the storm they feared. To erase their empire. And rewrite the rules. The city would remember my name. Not as a victim, but as the executioner, the reborn heir. The final reckoning had begun. And there would be no forgiveness. Only endings. Only ruins. Only truth written in fire. The city would burn, and I would stand above it. Not as a shadow, but as the law. The blood debt continues, and I am its keeper. Season 2 had truly begun. There was no turning back. Only forward. Into darkness. Into judgment. Into war. And I welcomed it. Because this time, I choose who bleeds. And who survives. The throne was watching. And so was fate. The storm had risen. And I was its heart. The empire was mine. And I would defend it. With everything I am. Season 2 had no mercy. Only consequence. Only justice. Only blood truth. And I was ready to collect it. But power always invites new predators. And that night, they finally showed their faces. A black envelope was left on my desk. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. My sister standing behind prison glass. Her eyes were bruised. Her lips were bleeding. And someone had carved numbers into her arm. A countdown. 7. 6. 5. A phone vibrated in my pocket. "You have 7 days," a distorted voice said, "or you bury her." I clenched my jaw. "Who are you?" A laugh answered me. "We are what your father tried to erase." The line went dead. I smashed the phone against the wall. The countdown had begun. And this time, I would not negotiate. I would hunt. I summoned my inner circle before dawn. Only 3 people were allowed in that room. Scarlett, Mason, and Victor. People who would kill for me without blinking. I placed the photo on the table. Silence swallowed the room. "They touched Lynn," I said coldly. "And that means war." Mason cracked his knuckles. "Just say where." Scarlett's eyes were sharper than knives. "They're from the Ash Circle," she said. "A forgotten syndicate. They collect people like assets." and erase bloodlines. Victor finally spoke. Your father burned them alive 20 years ago. But some survived. And now they want their revenge. I smiled without warmth. Good, let them come. I have graves waiting. Scarlett slid a flash drive toward me. Coordinates, names, safe houses, and a warning. They planted someone inside your company. A sleeper. I leaned back slowly. Then we start with a purge. By sunset, 3 executives were gone. 2 resigned. 1 vanished. And the city felt my shadow again. But the enemy was faster. A warehouse exploded near the river. It was one of mine. 5 men died. Their bodies were arranged in a circle. Ash symbols painted in blood. A message burned into the floor. Day 6. My fists tightened. They were playing with time. And I was running out of it. Scarlett whispered, "They're baiting you." "I'm done waiting," I replied. I ordered every gate closed. Every camera rerouted. Every weapon unlocked. This city became my battlefield. And I became its storm. Another envelope arrived. This one was heavier. Inside was a severed ring. Lynn's ring. My blood turned to ice. A card slipped out. Tomorrow. Bring the Empire. Or bring her coffin. I whispered to the dark. They chose the wrong king. I loaded my gun. And smiled. Because tomorrow, the ash circle would burn. Every last one of them. No mercy. No deals. No escape. Only reckoning. Only blood oath. Only the beginning. Season 2 had just awakened. And hell was answering my name. The next night arrived without mercy. Rain washed the city in silver. And I walked into their territory alone. The abandoned cathedral waited in silence. Candles formed a burning circle. And inside it, they stood. Masked. Armed. Smiling. A woman stepped forward. Her voice was velvet and poison. "Welcome home, Heir." She removed her mask. My breath stopped. She had my mother's eyes. "And your father's sins," she whispered. She snapped her fingers. Chains were dragged forward. Lynn was pushed into the light. Barely standing. I stepped closer. "Let her go," I said. The woman smiled wider. "You brought the Empire?" "I brought your ending." She laughed. Then the cathedral doors exploded. Gunfire shattered the silence. Scarlet's men flooded in. Mason dropped from the balcony. Victor locked the exits. Chaos swallowed the room. I ran straight for Lynn. A blade grazed my shoulder. But I didn't slow down. I tore the chains apart and pulled her into my arms. The masked woman screamed. "Kill him!" I turned back and met her eyes. "You should have stayed dead." She lunged. I fired once. She fell into the candle circle. Flames climbed her cloak, and her screams faded. The ash circle collapsed that night. Their files were burned. Their leaders disappeared. Their name became a rumor. Lynn survived, but she never spoke of that night. Neither did I. The Empire remained. So did my crown. But I learned one truth. Blood never forgets. And debts never die. I looked at the burning skyline and whispered my vow. No one will touch my blood again. This empire stands. This king endures. And the world will remember. Blood debt was paid. But the legend had only begun. End of Season 2.